Hello and welcome to the Wool and Twine Fiber Studio Knitting Podcast. My name is Jule and I'm the maker and natural dyer behind Wool and Twine Fiber Studio, which is a small creative space located here in northern Germany where I play with natural yarns, natural dyes and create sustainable yarns. This episode is not a knitting one, but rather a little introduction to something very exciting that I've been working on for way too long. So without further ado, let me tell you what I'm going to talk about. It's going to be a new limited edition yarn, although it's not as limited as our other ones. I have quite a bit more of this one. But since this one might require a little bit more explanation and introduction, because it might be new to some of you, I want to have a little dedicated episode to it. So I'm firstly going to tell you about the general info about it, show you the available colorways. I've also prepared a sample and some swatches where I can show you the structure of the yarn. So yeah, I've been using my quarantine in a good way. And then I'm going to share some pattern suggestions as well at the end of this video in case you're interested in the yarn but not sure what to make with it. And also tell you when it's going to be available and everything. So a little bit more of an admin, general information part at the end of the video. But yeah, without further ado, let me jump into the yarn introduction. So, as I told you, it's all going to be a new yarn that I've created. And this one is so special because you might know, if you've been following me on Instagram for a while and watched my previous podcast episodes, you will know that I really love to work with minimally processed and yarns that are quite like as close to the sheep as still possible. And therefore I really fell in love with unspun yarn a while ago, and ever since then wanted to make my own. And I'm telling you, making an unspun yarn if you don't have your own mill is kind of a challenge, because not many mills are able to do them, both machinery wise and like knowledge wise. And I've been requesting this from all the mills I've ever worked with, and also some that I don't work with yet, asking them if we could create something like it, but I got turned down so many times because there are a lot of like specialties to it, which I hope I can explain a bit more in depth at a certain point, because I'm hoping I can maybe have like a little interview with the mill person that made this yarn now. But yeah, there are a lot of challenges on the technical side to make unspun yarn, having to do with several different factors, and so I think I've been trying to get a mill to make one for me or for my shop approximately 2 years or so. And then there was also the challenge of finding the right sheep breeds, because unspun yarn is something very special because it's not spun, so it's not as strong as like a spun yarn that has also been plied, and so the blend of the fibers can really affect the way you can knit with it. So I kind of relied on both the knowledge of a mill that knows how the different fiber types interact, and that also can help me source local wool for it, because that was the second challenge. Finding the right breeds and having them available locally was kind of the next challenge. And so long story short, it took almost 2 years to get to the point where I finally had a mill be like, yes, let's do this. And then they had quite like some requirements regarding the amount that I had to purchase, which also was a bit like, it wasn't a challenge, but it's a commitment, let's say it that way, because I had to have this custom spun batch of unspun yarn. I had to get it like a larger amount, quite a large amount for a small business like me. And so yeah, it was all kind of a lot of work around this. And I'm so happy to finally be able to share this with you and the result of everything, because I could not be happier about it. So let me do it right now. This is it. This is our own custom spun, unspun yarn. And I've actually decided to give it a name. When I was thinking what to name it, maybe I was really inspired by the fact that this unspun yarn is kind of like the prequel of something, you know. It's not completely done, it's not like it's ready to use, but it's like the pre-form of yarn. And it's this kind of picture in my head led me into imagining it as something that can grow in your hands and that you can individually turn into what you want it to be, like by combining it with other yarns or using it on its own. And so kind of the picture of this yarn being able to grow into something and to be like, to become your own by using it in a certain way individually, I decided to call this yarn Thrive. So yeah, because it's kind of resembling how this yarn can be transformed into something beautiful, and how it can thrive in your hands. And so yeah, here we are with our custom spun yarn called Thrive. Where do I even start? Maybe with the smell. I know it might be weird, but I know some of you do it as well, like sniffing a yarn once you get it out of the packaging. And I can tell that it's this very lovely kind of sheepy smell. Not in the way that it's like unpleasant or very, very sheepy, where you feel like you're gonna smell like a sheep once you wear it, but the kind of grounding, natural sheepy smell that I just totally love. Which brings me to, like, the sheepiness brings me to the colors of the two, because they are both undyed and both two different like blends. So they have the natural sheepy colors in a darker and a lighter version. The sheep breeds that are in here are a blend of Gotland, which is not a local breed here in Germany, but it's often added to unspun yarn to add some strength, because the fibers in a Gotland wool are quite long and they can add quite a lot of strength. And the rest of this is a blend of several sheep breeds that are local to me here in Germany, and that are traditionally not necessarily used for their wool, except for there's a little bit of like merino landrace, which is a merino cross in this, which gives it its softness. But it's actually kind of nice that I can use, or I could use the wool for this yarn, because the breeds that are in here are the ones where the wool normally gets thrown away quite a bit here in Germany, because it's not meeting the industry standards in terms of softness. And so I'm happy that we were able to save some of their wool for this yarn. And yeah, the other breeds that are in here are Schwarzkopf, as I said, merino landrace, which is kind of a merino cross, if I remember correctly. Then there is some Bergschaf, which would translate to mountain sheep, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's also some Jura sheep in here, which is also a breed that's local here, and that's also very apparent in, I think, in Austria, if I'm not mistaken. And as mentioned, the Gotland. But yeah, it's kind of a wild mix of breeds because they all have their own like advantage when it comes to unspun yarn, because they all add either strength or volume that contributes to the strength. And so the mill and I curated this blend to be this way, so it can be knitted with comfortably. About the spinning process, or like the sourcing process, I'm happy to say that I was working with a German mill this time. And so, yeah, this is spun at a small family-owned German mill, and that's so exciting to me because I normally have to cross the border for getting like the smaller amount limited edition spun, for example, in Denmark or in like neighboring countries. But this time I was able to work with a German mill, and I'm just really happy because this is a truly German yarn this way. And yeah, I'm just really happy. I should maybe mention that the Gotland in here is not from Germany. It's the only part that we had to source directly from Sweden, because it's difficult to get Gotland in the amount that we would need for this yarn. And we were both kind of wanting to add the Gotland to the yarn because it's just, yeah, with the blend we created, I think it was necessary to add those longer staple fibers, and so we added the Gotland after all. But everything else, like, it's only a small part, and everything else is sourced and spun in Germany. And I'm just really happy about it. Amount-wise, this yarn is sold in 100-gram plates, and like around 100. It's a bit difficult to meet exactly the 100-gram mark, so they are all a little bit over 100 grams, but I will sell them all for the same price for the 100 grams. But yeah, they might be a little bit over, so you are getting more for your money, right? Yeah, I think that's the general information. Yardage-wise, it's never possible to completely safely say how many meters are on each plate, but I'm going to talk you through how to find the right amount and stuff in the next part or later in this video. And if you need any help with determining how much yarn you might need for a project, I'm always available. You can write me an email or an Instagram DM, and I'm gladly going to help you with my experience knitting with unspun yarn at how much you might need. The two colorways, as said, they are both natural sheep colors, and they are kind of, I wanted them to be contrasty, so you could even knit like color work with it. And this one is a darker gray. I think it appears a little bit lighter in camera than in real life, but it's like a medium to dark gray, but with a little bit of a warmish undertone, which comes from the Jura calf or Jura sheep, because that's a brown sheep, and I wanted it to be like a little warmer and not completely slate gray, if that makes any sense. And so we decided to make this a bit more warm in undertone. And same goes for the lighter colorway, which is like a gray with a beigey undertone. And I should maybe mention the names. This lighter colorway, I called it Breeze, and the darker colorway is called Stormcloud, because that's what it reminds me of pretty much. And here they're both next together. And this is Breeze, and this one is Stormcloud. And I'm just very happy with them. Yeah, what else am I supposed to say about this? I think that is it for the colorways. And as mentioned, I actually prepared quite some swatches and samples, just so you can imagine how to use this, the two colorways, either on their own or with something else. So let me jump right into the section and showing you all the little swatches and samples I knitted. Okay, for those of you who might be new to knitting with unspun yarn, you can both use it on its own, but also combine it with other like other fibers or other yarns. And I've tried to make a little array of swatches where I show you the different ways this can be knitted in. So first of all, I have a swatch. Let me put these over here because it's a bit messy otherwise. This is the first swatch I wanted to show you, and this is just the light colorway Breeze held double. So you can see it's quite a thick, squishy fabric, without being very stiff, so it's still quite drapey and lovely. And I think I've used 5mm or 5.5mm needles for this, for the double stranded version. And let me get a little bit closer so you can see, but here you can also see that come on, focus, that the Gotland creates quite a bit of a halo to the yarn. But yeah, this is how it looks, held double. And I also made a swatch with 2 strands of the Stormcloud colorway. And what you can see here is that there is a slight difference between the two colorways, because as I mentioned, unspun yarns heavily vary with the blend of fibers that are in them. And even though they are the same fibers in both of them, like the two colorways differ quite a bit. I'm going to talk you through that a little bit later, but you can see it in the swatches a little bit already, I think, if you compare them. Sorry for the little tags, I just had to like mark the little swatches so I know which is which after all. But this is the two together. And I think, yeah, it's visible that the white one, or the lighter one, is quite a bit squishier than the darker one. So these are the two held together. I think for people who are beginners with unspun yarn, this is the way I would recommend to start out, because it's a lot easier than using it single-stranded. But I'm also thinking of maybe recording a video on where I share my tips and tricks about unspun yarn. So in case you're interested in that, let me know in the comments down below, because yeah, I'm planning to do it. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, please let me know. But yeah, double-stranded is definitely very beginner-friendly, I would say. And then, what else do I have here? We have a little, don't judge me on this because I'm not very good at swatching in the round. But I've made a colorwork swatch where you can see how the contrast is. It's not the highest of contrasts, but I think definitely enough to make a pretty two-colored colorwork for sure. And you could easily combine it with any other unspun yarn. But yeah, here you can see the little contrast between the colors. So yeah, that is the Colourwork swatch. So this is how the yarn behaves on its own. By the way, the Colourwork swatch is also held double, so 2 strands of each color. And then there's also the opportunity, or what's very popular I think as well, to combine unspun yarns with a silk mohair, because that adds a lot of strength to the yarn, and that way you can also easily use just 1 strand of the unspun and just 1 strand of a silk mohair. And the only silk mohair I recommend out of ethical reasons is the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair, because they have the highest standard in animal welfare, and also they make sure that the silk component of the yarn is gathered from cocoons where the moth has already hatched. So, because in commercial silk production, I don't want to go in depth about it, but the silkworms inside the cocoons are actually cooked alive. And it's just overall a little bit controversial, the whole thing about commercial silk production, and definitely not something I want to contribute to. And so the Knitting for Olive one is always the one I recommend. And so, for your convenience, I have tested a few colorways that would go well with both of the colors we created. So, first of all, with the Stormcloud colorway, I found that the colorway Dusty Moose is pretty much an exact match color-wise, and that one I also swatched for you, so you can see how it looks together. And for this swatch I have used 2 strands of the unspun and 1 strand of the silk mohair. And this is how it looks. I think it's very pretty, and you can barely see the mohair because it blends in so well with the color of the yarn. So it's a pretty good match. I mean, it doesn't always have to be a good match. You can always like shift the color of the yarn with a different colored mohair, which is what I'm going to show you next. But yeah, if you want a mohair that is pretty much the exact same color as Stormcloud, then it's the Dusty Moose colorway. I'm gonna show you one more time. And with the Breeze colorway, I kind of found 2 options that would work very well, depending on what kind of undertones you want to bring out, because the yarn is something between a grey and a beige, I would say. And so depending on what undertone you would like to have, you can either use the Pearl Grey colorway by Knitting for Olive, which is kind of more like a coolish tone and brings out the grey in the yarn more. And that's what I have. Whoops. Here. This is how it looks. Whoopsie, here's a little strand. But this is how it looks. It's a bit more grey this way. And then if you would prefer to bring out the more warm undertones of the yarn, I found out that the colorway Oat works really well with the Breeze colorway. It's a bit more warmish in undertone and brings out the beige a bit more. And I also swatched that one for you, so you can see that it's an overall more warmish undertone. Let me show you the 2 next to each other, maybe this way it's more visible. Oopsie! It's very hard to see in this light, I have to say. But in real life, it's definitely more apparent that this one is more coolish in undertone and this one is a little bit more warm. it's not a huge difference, but yeah, it's just a subtle kind of difference, and depending on whether you prefer a more warm or a more like coolish tone, you can use either pearl grey or oat, which is this one. I'm also going to link the colorways and brand and all that below, just so you can see it for yourself. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Knitting for Olive or anything. It's just a heartfelt recommendation, and because I know that many of you like to pair unspun with mohair, I wanted to give you some options and wanted to prepare some things for you. So those were the swatches, and of course I was using my quarantine well and also knitted a whole sample, and I can't believe I managed to finish this in such a short amount of time. But yeah, as said, quarantine and 6mm needles was the way to go. I really wanted to wear this for the video, but it's way too warm today and I would have been boiling in this because it's crazy warm. But without further ado, let me show you a sample that I've knitted out of the colorway Breeze. And some of you might notice, but it's the Ranunculus sweater by Midori Hirose. Sorry if I'm saying that wrongly, but it's almost, by now it's almost a classic. A lot of people have knitted it, also especially in unspun yarn. But it's like a round yoke sweater with a few raglan increases and a textured yoke that's just very lovely. And then it has a simple stockinette body and a ribbing, and it has pretty straight sleeves with a little I-cord bind off, which I think it looks very lovely. I don't know if you can see, but it's just a pretty detail. And yes, this is just the perfect pattern for this yarn because it really makes, like, the texture is kind of muted down by the hairiness of the yarn, but it's still very pretty, I think. And also here you can see in a little bit of a larger stockinette portion at how perfectly even this yarn knits up. I was really happy when I worked on this because I love whenever a yarn does this, that the fabric is so extremely even. And so I was very satisfied when I knitted this one. So yeah, this is my Ranunculus sweater, and yeah, I absolutely enjoyed knitting this one. I've hit gauge for the pattern with 2 strands of the Breeze colorway on 6mm needles, and yeah, I think I've cast on for size 4. And yeah, this is how it turned out, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm definitely going to insert a few clips where you can see me wearing it, just because, yeah, I couldn't wear it all the time through the video because I would have been boiling. Because that's one of the advantages of unspun yarn for sure, is that it, because it's not spun, it can trap a lot of air. And it's very lightweight but still super warm, and that's also what I really enjoy about knitting with it. And if you're a beginner at knitting with unspun yarn and you are a little bit afraid of it breaking in your hands, I would say the Breeze colorway is definitely a very good starting point because of how strong it is and how well it holds up. Especially if you want to go for a single-stranded project, I think I would definitely go for the Breeze one. While I think for a two-stranded project, the Stormcloud is very lovely because it has a little bit more, like, it's not as puffy as the Breeze colorway, and it has even more drape, if that makes any sense. So I'm definitely going to cast on a pattern holding 2 strands of the Stormcloud colorway next, just so I can show you the difference in the 2 blends. But I would say, yeah, for both can be also with a single strand and a mohair, for example. But if you're a beginner and not very, like a little bit afraid of the breakage, then go for the Breeze colorway, because that one is even easier than the Stormcloud one. Speaking of like knowing unspun yarn, being used to it or whatever, I thought it would be helpful to maybe compare our Thrive yarn to some other not mohairs, some other unspun yarns that are available on the market and that might be a bit more widely known. So you can kind of have an idea at how this compares to some more widely available versions. So the first yarn I want to compare our Thrive unspun yarn to is good old trusty Plötulopi by Eastex. I think this is the most widely available unspun yarn on the market, and it's yeah, it's made from Icelandic wool by a brand called Eastex, and this definitely is the classic, I would say. It's very strong, I would say, and thickness wise this is like the Thrive unspun, our unspun, is close to Plötulopi. So I don't know if you can see, let me show you some threads next to each other. So let me come a little bit closer. This is Plötulopi, and then this is our own yarn Thrive at the top. So thickness wise I think it's kind of close. Maybe Thrive is a tiny bit puffier and also a bit more bouncy, whereas Plötulopi is quite, you see that? It's quite, yeah, not as bouncy, but very strong. I would say Plötulopi is has more of the longer fibers in the yarn, so you can really see if I pull it this way, I cannot pull it easily, while I can pull the Thrive, like it's still hard, but it's a bit easier to pull it apart. But in comparison to Plötulopi, I would say Thrive is a lot softer. Like there, you can see there are quite some longer staples in the Plötulopi, which obviously makes it a lot stronger. Like not a lot, but makes it very strong. But at the same time, it's quite a bit more rustic feeling and more, like I always put it against my neck because that's one of the most sensitive parts. But I would say there are a lot more of those, yeah, like longer staples that are also can feel a little bit itchy, whereas Thrive is quite a bit softer, I would say. So if Plötulopi is maybe a touch too rustic for you, sorry, my chair is really squeaky, but then Thrive could be working for you softness wise. But yeah, also you can see the difference in the spinning process here, which is kind of funny because look how like Plötulopi is quite more densely spun and very like low in height, whereas Thrive is like a little like a little dome cupcake. I don't know how to explain this, but diameter wise it's actually kind of close. Plötulopi is a tiny bit more like larger in diameter. But yeah, to sum it up, I think it's very close in thickness, But Thrive is a lot softer and maybe not as strong as the Plötulopi, but definitely strong, totally strong enough from my experience. I've knitted with way more like yarns that are way more prone to breaking. Which brings me to the next comparison that is not necessarily widely available, but definitely more well known, and that is Nutiden. And Nutiden is the example of what I mentioned, that an unspun depends on the blend of fibers, because every color of Nutiden is blended differently, and therefore there are a lot of different strengths and how it feels and everything. And with Nutiden, I can say that most blends, or many blends, are a little bit thinner in the single threads than Thrive is. Although I would say the darker color, the Stormcloud colorway, is quite close to some colorways I've knitted with in Nutiden. But as mentioned, every blend is different of the Nutiden, and so I cannot really generalize that. But if you would ask me for a general rule of thumb, if you will, I would say the Stormcloud colorway reminds me more of some blends that I've used of Nutiden thickness-wise, whereas Breeze reminds me a little bit more of the Plötulopi, despite being a lot softer. So just to give you an example, I've knitted the first swatch I showed you that was quite dense in the double-stranded Breeze colorway was on 5mm needles, and I would not necessarily go lower than that. Whereas I think Stormcloud, as well as Nutiden, for example, can easily be knitted on like 4 or 4.5mm needles. So yeah, just to give you an idea of how the blend behaves. I think it's really funny because with some of the blends of Nutiden I have, they also have a lot of Gotland in some of the ones I used. And I can see that you can definitely see the higher amount of Gotland in this one compared to Breeze. And that's so interesting because I seem to be very drawn towards Gotland blends. And that's also maybe why this one is a bit closer to the Nutiden, and all in texture and how it behaves when you knit with it. So I hope this little comparison, I have some fibers in my nose, I guess. I hope this gives you a bit more of an idea of how this yarn is compared to other unspun ones. But yeah, it's always the case that every unspun is different, so I can just recommend trying it yourself. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, because I know it can be difficult to shop something without having it in your hands for at least once. So always feel free to email or message me, and I'll gladly help. Okay, next up I would like to chat you through the specialties of unspun when it comes to choosing the right amount. Because as mentioned, the unspun yarn does have a lot more air in it than spun yarns have, and therefore they are a lot more lightweight, and which is the great thing about it, because you normally need a little bit less yardage of unspun than you would need in a normally, like, regularly plied one or spun yarn. For example, for my ranunculus sweater that I've knitted in size 4, I think, I've used around 370 grams, so below 400. But that one is a cropped a crop pattern. So I would not necessarily say that below 400 is enough for any kind of sweater or garment pattern, but for my size, which is like I think I'm around a 98 centimeter bust, so I normally knit sizes 4. I would say I always go for around 400 grams, and that should be enough. I even once made one of my work sweaters that I'm going to show you at some point, but it's just really, I have to wash it before. But I got away with around 300 grams for that one, so double-stranded. So it definitely depends on the pattern. So of course cables take up more yarn than just a regular stockinette, and depending on how open the gauge is, a more open gauge will use less yarn than a tighter one, and so it always depends a little bit. But I would say rule of thumb for a garment that you'd like to knit double-stranded with an unspun, I would go for 500 grams roundabout. For like a size medium to large, and maybe 700 to 800 grams for larger sizes than that. But as mentioned, if you don't have a lot of experience with knitting with unspun yarns, I will gladly help. If you have a certain project in mind, you can share that with me and also your measurements, and I'm gladly going to help you with that. But general rule of thumb, medium to large, 500 grams. A small size would probably go away with, or extra small or small would probably get away with 400 grams, but I would always go for 500 just to be on the safe side. And then 7 to 8 for larger sizes, depending on the fit you desire. For shawls, I would always calculate between 200 and 300 grams, also depending on what kind of shawl you want to make. Like if you want to make a traditional, like kind of smallish triangular shawl, then I would say 200 to 300 grams is totally fine. But of course there are also shawl patterns out there that require quite a bit more yardage, and so then you should maybe go for like a 500 grams or so, but yeah, that would be plenty, I would say. And also what's helpful is looking at, if you're on Ravelry and you're able to use Ravelry, you can always look at projects from other people and how much they used. If you're unsure about how much a certain pattern or like a cabled one would take, you can also always have a look at similar patterns on Ravelry and see if someone maybe knitted something similar. And that's definitely how I first learned how to purchase unspun yarn, because my first purchases were completely hilarious, because I was always thinking, I normally for a sweater for myself, I buy between 500 and 600 grams to be on the safe side, because I like oversized garments and such. And I purchased the same from unspun yarn, and I ended up using like half of it or so. So or like a little bit more than half of it. So that's definitely how I learned it. And at the beginning I started looking at other Ravelry projects, and that helped a lot. So definitely recommending to check out other people's projects, because it can help a lot. Speaking of projects, I have curated a little list of pattern suggestions that I can imagine will look very lovely in this new unspun yarn. And I wanted to share them with you, just in case you feel like, oh, I like the yarn and I like the idea of it and everything, but I don't really know what it's suitable for. I've got you covered. So first of all is a very recently released pattern by Hayley of Ozetta Knitwear, and that one is the Miles shirt jacket, I think it's called. It's called, if you type in Miles, you're gonna find it, and I'm also going to link it down below. But it's like an oversized shirt cardigan kind of thingy, and it looks like the coziest little jacket. And yeah, I'm definitely going to make one for myself next. Well, maybe not next, but it's going to be one of my next projects that I'm going to knit myself. And I think it only is released this weekend. I think so, yeah. So it's a pretty new one, and it's very lovely stockinette stitch with some pockets and like a double folded collar, and I think, yeah, it's just a very lovely wardrobe staple, and it's a little bit longer than your traditional cardigan would be, so it kind of hits at the middle of the thigh, I guess. And that's very lovely to knit with unspun yarn, because unspun yarn has drape, but it doesn't weigh itself down necessarily, because it's so lightweight that you don't have to worry about it being like very, very, very drapey. Like you can have that with alpaca or something, that it really weighs itself down and then your garment grows longer and longer. That's not going to happen with unspun yarn very quickly, because it's just too lightweight and it will bounce back very easily and not weigh itself down. So the Miles cardigan is very lovely, or shirt jacket I think it's called, sorry. Next up is another kind of simplistic, minimalistic pattern, that's the Forager by Melody Hoffman. I'm knitting myself a version at the moment out of Nutiden, and I've casted that one on quite a while ago, way before I had Our Own Unspun Yarn Thrive arrive here. So, but that one is just a pretty simple raglan construction sweater that's knit in one, I think it's designed in one strand of unspun and one strand of silk mohair, but you can easily also do it with like a double-stranded unspun, which is what I did for my version. So either way works perfectly, and it's just a very lovely layering piece that's very wearable, I think. Sorry if I'm looking down here, it's my notes here because I could not remember all the patterns on the top of my head. Next up is a pattern that's called Versal by Albiona McLaughlin. Oh, sorry if I'm saying this wrong, but Albiona is like the queen of unspun patterns, as well as Melody Hoffman is, of course, but I think Albiona has several lovely designs in unspun yarn, so it definitely is worth it checking her patterns out. But the Versal is another very classic pullover kind of. It's also, of course, as all the patterns I usually, like with all the patterns I try to recommend, they are always size inclusive to a certain chest circumference. So yeah, all of Albiona's patterns are also size inclusive. So definitely maybe check her patterns out. There also is a cardigan that I just remembered now that I'm talking about Albiona, that I've been wanting to make for a long while. That's called the, I think it's Tulk, but it means the ultimate lazy cardigan, I think, because it's a very simple pattern. So I think it's very lovely for beginner unspun knitters, so definitely worth checking out. I'm trying to, by the way, recommend also some more challenging patterns, but a few patterns that are also suitable for people who might not be too familiar with unspun yarn. So you can maybe get familiar with how to adjust your tension and everything with these kind of more minimalistic patterns that I'm just recommending. So yeah, the Ultimate Lazy Cardigan by Albiona is also very easy top-down, if I'm remembering correctly, top-down construction with just a lot of stockinette stitch going on. And then next up, if you need a little bit more, or if you'd like a little bit more of a challenge, not necessarily a challenge, but not only stockinette stitch, I can recommend the Fluff Nugget cardigan by Becky Sørensen or Soprano Knits, which is kind of a brioche cardigan, like a cropped one, but with a very classic fit. And I think that one could also be very lovely in our lighter colorway Thrive, just so you, not Thrive, sorry, the yarn is called Thrive, but in Breeze, just so you can have, like, you can see the little brioche pattern a little bit better. And another textured pattern I really love is the Wildflowers Path by Melody Hoffman of Be Mandarins again. She has a lot of patterns designed in unspun yarn, so that's why you will find her in my little list here a couple of times. But that one is like almost like the ranunculus. It's like a textured yoke that just looks very lovely because because of the muted effect that the unspun gives the texture, and it's not too crisp, which is what I personally really like. So yeah, the Wildflowers Path, and I think there's also one that's called Wild Posy, Wild Posy sweater. I think it's called that way. But that one's also very lovely and has a textured yoke as well. So in case you're looking for a little bit more of a challenge and some texture to knit with the unspun, then I can recommend that one, as well as the ranunculus that I just showed you from Midori Hirose that I knitted out of Breeze. And another very lovely pattern with some texture, but this time not on the yoke but on the sleeves, that would be the Koyame pattern by Joanna Ang. That one features a really cool kind of soft geometrical pattern going down the sleeves, and it's a top-down construction as well, if I'm remembering. I remember there was something special about the construction, but never mind. It's just a lovely pattern and I can really recommend that one. I think it's designed in one strand of unspun with a mohair, and that one is very lightweight, so maybe perfect for summer knitting. And yeah, coming to some accessory patterns as well, because as said, it's very nice to use unspun for garments because of it being so lightweight and everything, but you can also very nicely use it for accessories. And there are some patterns such as the Moorland mittens by Tanya Barley that I like. They feature kind of a leafy, flowery motif on the mitten, and it's very pretty. And then there's also the Gros Shawl by my friend Lerke of Fibretales, which features a little flowery motif as well. That one is very pretty, and I've been wanting to knit myself one for ages, but I have never come across for some reason. And then there's another shawl pattern called Yohira by Eri Shimizu. I'm always so embarrassed. But I've been actually, I'm knitting one right now. It's kind of buried in my work in progress pile, but it's very enjoyable and it features kind of wrapped stitches and a lovely texture that's actually, it reminds me of some parts of the ranunculus as well, but it's more like in a shawl pattern, and I think you can perfectly adjust the size of the shawl depending on how much yarn you have, which I think is very cool. And it's just a beautiful pattern, so definitely recommending that one. As well as I've seen someone knit the Hidden Paths shawl by Anja Heumann in unspun yarn, and that is beautiful. It kind of features a very intricate cable pattern going on the shawl panel. And it's just very beautiful. I think she designed that one in an alpaca yarn, but I saw some of her testers using an unspun for it, and I completely fell in love with it. So definitely can recommend trying that pattern with an unspun. And then last but not least, a hat pattern that's also by Melody Hoffman of Be Mandarins. That is called Brume, if I'm not mistaken. And it's I think she holds 2 strands of unspun with a mohair, but I think you can just adjust depending on your gauge. And it's just a very simple kind of how do you say, is it toque? It's like, or a beanie, like a classic ribbed beanie that is just very versatile. And I've knitted that one out of a different yarn a while ago, but I'm definitely going to knit another one once the weather cools down again and hats are needed again, because as mentioned, the unspun yarn in general is very, very warm, and so it's very perfect to keep your ears warm when it's windy and cold, which is it is not right now, but I don't think that should keep you from knitting with unspun in the summer, because as long as it's not too hot to knit at all, I think unspun, because of its lightness and airiness, is still quite easy to knit in the summer as well. It's not like you're having a heavy warm blanket on your lap, but it's more very lightweight, especially if you use it single-stranded with, for example, a mohair or something. So yeah, those are the little pattern suggestions I have for you. They are all going to be linked down below, just so you can access them easily. Just a quick disclaimer that most of them will have a Ravelry link, so in case you're having struggles with that, just Google the pattern name and the designer maybe, and it should link you to either a website of a designer or maybe Lovecrafts or whatever page it will work maybe alternatively. I'm really, I'm super excited to release this yarn, and I'm going to share you a couple of general information with you now about availability and how it's all going to work, and also tell you a little bit admin stuff around the shop, because this shop update is going to be a bit different from our previous ones, because as said, I'm not going to have new dyed yarn because I was too sick to get it ready for this update. But we will release the unspun in this update. So there might be a little bit of dyed yarn left, but mainly this update will be about our unspun yarn Thrive. And the update will be on the 29th of April, which should be the Friday, the next upcoming, and at 8 p.m. GMT +2, I think, the Berlin time zone. I'm also going to put it all down below and add reminders to Instagram and everything, just so you can get reminded. But yeah, that's when the yarn is going to be available. And as mentioned, it's not as limited as our other limited editions were recently. I have a slightly larger amount of the unspun now, but still I only have a certain amount now, and I would recommend, if you're looking for it, to get it now, because I don't know how long it's gonna last. I might try it and give just a batch of the yarn in this update and then spread it a little bit more so I can have it in the next update as well. But I would recommend, because I don't know how big the batch is going to be and how quickly it will sell, so I would recommend definitely being on time for this update on Friday if you would like to get the unspun. But what I kind of switched up, I used my quarantine well for some admin work, and I have worked on another shipping option that we have in the shop right now, that I'm trying out currently, but it's a tracked shipping, but it's not insured, because normally we ship all our parcels with DHL and it's all tracked and insured, and in case something gets lost, it's not a problem. But we now also offer a not insured tracking option that is significantly cheaper, especially for overseas orders. Like, there won't be a big change to German orders, because we are sticking with the regular order like we did before, because there's not a big difference in price between the uninsured version and the insured version. So Germany is gonna stay the same, but overseas orders can be significantly cheaper. I think especially for overseas like US and Canada, it should almost be half of the shipping costs that we had recently. So I hope this way I can make things a little bit more accessible. The only issue with this shipping option is that it's limited to a certain weight and a certain size of parcel. So I think up to 600 or 700 grams of yarn can be shipped with this shipping option. In case you're ordering over a kilo, the shop will automatically change to the tracked and insured shipping option, because that's the only one that I can ship parcels over a kilo with. And so just keep that in mind. 1,000 grams or 1 kilo is the maximum for the cheaper shipping option. And that contains the packaging materials. So in case you want to know, it's like 6 to 7 skeins or 600 to 700 grams of yarn. So you can order, I think, 6 plates of this with a cheaper shipping option. So that is it about the new shipping. I hope it will work. It's supposed to be significantly faster as well, because it uses, it's not the parcel system, but it's like the postal system that's used for this one. And so I've had some test orders going with this shipping option, and they were significantly faster, especially for overseas. So I hope that this will make it easier for my international customers that I value so much. Thank you. But yeah, that's why I try to work on something that's a bit more reasonable in pricing and also maybe a little bit faster. Although we're still in the middle of a pandemic and the world is a crazy place right now, so it can always happen that there are delays. But I just hope it's going to be a bit faster. Yes, that's it about the admin stuff. As said, the yarn will be available on Friday, the 29th, 8 p.m. GMT +2. I can also recommend you to sign up for my newsletter, just so I can remind you again once the update goes live, because I always send out a newsletter message to my subscribers, so you can get reminded once the shop is live. And yeah, I think I've rambled quite a long time now, and I hope this was helpful, especially with the swatches and comparison things. If I can help you with anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I know that with Unspun it can be new to some people, and yeah, I hope that I will be able to answer all your questions before you purchase. And yeah, I hope you will love this yarn as much as I do, and that you are looking forward to the new shop update as well. And yeah, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely weekend, and hope to see you at the shop update. Bye!